gonna record. I see you are recording already. Great. So I'll shut up here. The floor is yours, and we look forward to it.
Okay, thanks, Juan, and thank you very much, and thank you everybody for showing up. I have my profession, I'm a marketing consultant, so I really have to keep my target audience in mind. So we're talking about Princetonians I'm talking to, and I know that Princetonians like things that are big ideas, big things, the big picture. In my day, we had megaceps, and the Princetonians that I've shown and I'm going to show you in my presentation had big ideas, very big ideas. So I'm trying to make that congruent with what you guys might want. So to this group, I dare not say anything small. To give one example from my own experience, when I was working at IBM, I worked for the head of the international department responsible for radio advertising and the movies that they made for TV. His name was Chuck Francis. And back in the day, Carl Sagan came to him and presented to him an idea for a TV show for IBM called Universe. And Carl Sagan presented this whole thing, and Chuck Francis says, no, we're not interested. And Carl Sagan said, why not? He said, the subject matter isn't big enough for IBM. And with that, we will start. So I'm going to share the screen. I hope this shows up. Oh, it says share screen, and it's not showing. It's not showing my. Wait, let me just bring it up. Oh, here we are. Now, can you see that? Joanne, can you see? Can you see that?
Your video went off, but we don't see your slides.
Okay. It's not allowing me to share the screen the way I normally do. It says your entire screen, application window, and Microsoft Edge tab. It doesn't allow me to share the screen.
I don't see your computer. Alternatively, you could email me your slides, and I could, I could be the one sharing them, if that is preferable.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's have to do that. Let me email that to you now.
Mm-hmm. And just when to move forward with the slides, and I'll do that.
Yeah, you'll just have to follow my lead on that. Okay, new email. Okay, just sent it to you.
Great, thanks.
Now I'm gonna pull up your screens, your slides, I mean. Great. Can everyone see the slides now?
I can't see. Oh, here it is. Okay, I see it.
Yeah, I see thumbs up. All right. I realized we didn't go around the room, but perhaps we can do that when Randy finishes the presentation.
Okay, so I'll just say next.
So Randy, the floor is yours. I hope
okay.
You can see.
Go on. I'll say next for the next slide. Okay.
Next slide. You got it.
So the next slide is, let's start at the beginning in Princeton, New Jersey in 1753. Next slide, where we have Fitz-Randolph Gate. In 2016, the class of 1970 opened Fitz-Randolph Gate forever as a symbol of the university's openness to the local and worldwide community with an engraved inscription, and you can see it there, which I never knew that inscription was there, but it was 1970, class 1970. It says, together for community. At that same ceremony, just 135 feet from Fitzrandolph Gate, halfway between the gate and Nassau Hall, is another inscription in stone of the updated informal Princeton motto. And please note, wait, before you go.
Oh, sorry.
Back, please note that Nathaniel Fitzrandolph was my great uncle, and my name Randolph is from my mother's maiden name, Mary Fitzrandolph. Okay, next. So here's this Princeton in the nation's service and the service of humanity, the updated motto of Princeton. And that's the rubric under which we're going to talk about peace and Princeton. And this was recommended by the Supreme Court. No, I'm sorry, not yet. This was recommended by Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor. Okay, next. So Princeton and world peace. In January 1918, in a speech to Congress, Wilson announces his 14 points for world peace. The 14th point was, a general association of nations must be formed under specific covenants for the purpose of affording mutual guarantees of political independence and territorial integrity to great and small states alike. In December 1919, he won the Nobel Peace Prize as the leading architect of the League of Nations. October 1945, 27 years later, Wilson's principles were re-enshrined in the formation of the United Nations. So his shadow of influence cast unabated for 101 years and counting. Next, March 1st, 1961, via executive order, John F. Kennedy, originally class of 39, of course, establishes the Peace Corps. And the goals of this Peace Corps were helping the people of interested countries and areas meet their needs for trained workers, helping promote a better understanding of Americans in countries where volunteers served, helping promote a better understanding of peoples of other nations on the part of Americans, and his shadow of influence also continues to cast unabated for 59 years. Here are some new pictures I found of John F. Kennedy with the freshman class of 1939 in front of Clio Hall in 1935. On the left, you can see him with an arrow, and to the right is a close-up of him. So that's just some new information, kind of fun. Next slide. So Princeton and world peace, we have some 1939 sidebars. As you guys may have seen in the Alumni Weekly, his best friend was Lem Billings in the class of 39, a lifelong best friend. And in 1937, there's a book written about 1937, Jack and Lem, The Untold Story of an Extraordinary Friendship. And this is a photocopy of the diary that John F. Kennedy wrote in 1937 when he went with Lem to France, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany. Next slide. So this has relevance to me because my uncle was also in the class of 1939. His name was Ed Hobler. He was class president. And in Munich, believe it or not, in 1937, Jack and Lem ran into my uncle. And here's the excerpt from Kennedy's diary. He said, he wrote, ran into Big Eddie Hobler. He was the toast of our class and makes me feel quite proud to be a classmate. I suppose my picture appeared in that Princeton class of 39 album with a big blank space. The tables of history turned 24 years later when Kennedy was sworn in as a different kind of president. And just 1 year later, 1962, at the ripe old age of 45, Ed Hobler decided to take up squash. He became the national senior champion 10 times over the years, and I saw him in his very last match up at Yale. There was only 2 people in the 85 to 90 thing, and he won. Next. Mark Levine, 66, was part of a team that shared the Nobel Peace Prize with a Harvard guy, Al Gore, in 2007. He was a key architect of the ICPP, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the co-winner of the award for its hugely influential worldwide report on climate change. Mark's chapter on reducing greenhouse gases got the best rating of all 15 chapters of the report. Over 5 years, the work took him worldwide. Next. While there's no space to recognize all the myriad unsung, unheralded, uncelebrated Princetonians contributing to world peace, why not epitomize one of those who toiled in the trenches for 20 years to represent them all? In the annals of Princeton, in the nation's service, he deserves an asterisk. Not that Princeton asterisk for grad alums, not that one for hitting 61 home runs. No, an asterisk to history. And his bona fides, if that's the way you pronounce it, summa cum laude at Princeton, Fulbright in Germany, PhD in chemistry at Berkeley, Ford Foundation, SRI, co-created energy efficiency standards for all of China, resulting in the equivalent savings of 126 nuclear power stations. He won the Obayashi Prize, and the only other American to win was Paul Krugman, and a Lifetime Achievement Award from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Next. Josh Miner, 43, a longtime physics teacher, coach, housemaster, and director of admissions at Andover, introduced Outward Bound to the US in 1961, and I knew him when I was at Andover. Throughout the 1960s, Outward Bound trained a host of Peace Corps volunteers in outdoor skills through exacting physical challenges, team building, and compassion for others. 600,000 people have gone through the program. He has been recognized each year since 1995 at reunions when the Josh Miner 43 Experiential Education Award is conferred on chosen Princeton graduates. Next. So Sergeant Shriver showed up at Andover, and there he is. And he's accompanied by Josh Miner, and he's surrounded by the Andover class of 1960, those who had been in the Peace Corps together. And I was able to wangle this picture somehow from Andover. Next. Nick Craw, class of 59, was the only Tiger to have been Peace Corps director, the sixth, appointed in 1973 by President Nixon. He served for 1 year. Once in Nepal, a volunteer had an attack of blood poisoning. Nick commandeered a Jeep and drove it around Mount Everest until he found a hospital. Among his claims to fame, president of the Princeton Skydiving Club, I'd never heard of that one, an accomplished national race car driver, and a longtime president of the Sports Car Club of America. When he was a young man, at an event not having anything to do with the Peace Corps per se, he met JFK at the White House. Next slide. George Johnson, also 59, holds the distinction of being the first Princeton grad to serve in the Peace Corps in Tanganyika, now Tanzania, 1961 to 1963. Here he is in the White House, shaking Kennedy's hand the same way that Nick Craw was. And this handshake sends him and his contingent off to Africa on August 28th, 1961, with Sergeant Shriver in the background observing. Next. To date, I've identified 252 Tiger Peace Corps volunteers spread out over these 42 countries. And you can look at those as quickly as I can, because I've been developing a database for Tigers who've been in the Peace Corps. Next slide. While the Peace Corps has a high profile, at least hundreds of Princeton grads have served in exactly similar circumstances all over the globe for missions, schools, and NGOs. These Tigers deserve recognition as well, but I don't have the time or the wherewithal to track them all down. These hundreds of organizations are like the Presbyterian Church, the Jesuits, CARE, the Red Cross, Africa Corps, Operation Crossroads Africa, which, by the way, inspired the Peace Corps, Doctors Without Borders, Lutheran World Relief, Peace Brigades International, UNICEF, USAID, and many more. Next. 4 Princetonian Peace Corps volunteers served as ambassadors, and here they are. My friend Cameron Hume, class of 68, my classmate, he and I served in Peace Corps Libya together, but he went on to be ambassador to South Africa, Indonesia, and Algeria. Edmund Hall from the class of 71 served in the Peace Corps in Tunisia, and he became ambassador to Yemen. Robert Finn, grad 78, his Peace Corps went into the Peace Corps in Turkey. He's ambassador to Afghanistan and Tajikistan, and by the way, he speaks 15 languages. Donald Liu, class of 88 and grad school 91, served in the Peace Corps in Sierra Leone, and he is currently ambassador to Kyrgyz Republic, otherwise known as Kyrgyzstan. Next. Peace and war. So the big picture here, Peace can have its heroes too. It's a great quote I found in the great books. So one of the people who came to me that I interviewed for my book was Julia Martin Lefebvre. She was in Libya 3, and she has earned the Chevalier de l'Ordre National de la Légion d'Honneur, a high-ranking honor in France. And she asked the question, why is there no cabinet position, Secretary of Peace? Other questions one might ask is, where are the statues of the peacemakers? Or, why is the Defense Department budget $738 billion, enough to annihilate everyone on Earth 10 times over, and the Peace Corps budget only $410 million, or 0.6%? Or to put it in terms of manpower, why are there 1.3 million men and women in the armed forces and only 7,000 Peace Corps volunteers? Next. So these are the issues around Princeton's motto that apply to service to humanity. How many books and movies are there about war versus peace? What about engaging with friends rather than engaging with the enemy? What about winning hearts and minds versus winning on the battlefield? And what does this say about the balance of values in our society? Just things to think about. Next. So the megacept, as we said in our day, war is visible, peace is invisible. War assaults all our senses. Peace concerns hearts and minds you cannot see. Yet ultimately, the invisible is the most powerful. With the naked eye, we can't see atoms or DNA. We can't see gravity, but it is all pervasive. We can't see great ideas. We can't see values. We can't see principles. And we can't see the essence of the Peace Corps experience, human bonding. But all these things are quite compellingly real. Only war's an easy sell and peace is hard. Next. So there are a number of people who are Princeton grads who have written books, besides myself, about the Peace Corps. We have Bob Huggins, of class of 43, who served both in Nepal and in Lesotho. And he's also the oldest Tiger volunteer at the age of 65. And you can see his book, cover of his book there, Experiencing Peace Corps as a Volunteer Over Age 60. Next. Dave Fleischhacker, class of 59, wrote a book, Lessons from Afghanistan. Next. James Fisher, 59. And by the way, here we've got Nick Craw, 59, George Johnson, 59, David Fleischhacker, 59, and Jim Fisher. Jim Fisher, 59, so the class scores a Peace Corps quadrifecta. And Jim wrote this book, At Home in the World, about Nepal also. Next. Peter Hessler, class of 92, wrote an award-winning New York Times bestseller, Rivertown, all about his experiences in China. He happens to be fluent in Mandarin, and he's a brilliant New Yorker writer, as so many of them are. Next. Then there's my book, 101 Arabian Tales, How We All Persevered in Peace Corps Libya. And that's the cover. Just two quotes for you about this. One is from Niels Marquardt, former ambassador to many nations and a Peace Corps volunteer twice. He said, Randy Holber has written the best memoir of a Peace Corps experience that I've ever read. His amazingly detailed book instantly grips the reader by putting Libya in its properly rich and unique historical perspective. And then Nick Craw, class of 59, says, a magnum opus. I must remark that the level of detail in terms of time, places, and people is remarkable. This book does remind one how living in utter simplicity has beauty and how uncluttered time leads to clarity. Aside from any other benefits of PCV service, this is at the heart of many volunteers' experience, and it is captured well. Holber's efforts to obtain the medals for a Libyan veteran of World War II was very touching. A poignant example of making one friend at a time, which Sergeant Shriver referred to. Next. Interesting piece of, I like factoids, I like little fun stories and things. This is Libya in Arabic, and it reads the same left and right in Arabic. And I think it's the only, as far as I know, it's the only country in the world that is a palindrome, a visual palindrome. And if for those of you who are who are Arabic scholars. That's Lem, yeah, Bet, yeah, and Lem, or Aleph, yeah, Bet, yeah, and Lem at the end. Aleph at the end. Okay, next. Now, the story of my book, and I try to make it brief here, is of 3 Libyan contingents. Libya 1 from 66 to 68, Libya 2, 68 to 69, which was my group, and Libya 3, 1969 to 1969, and that group was aborted because they did their whole summer training in Arabic and training to teach and all that in Libya. But on September 1st, 1969, at the end of their training, Gaddafi pulled his coup in Libya, and they had to go to other places. So from training to in-country to revolution to 50-year epilogues covers the arc of this story. And I should point out also, there's all these coincidences in the book, but of all the dorms that they could have chosen at Princeton University for Libya 1 in the summer of 1966, they trained them in 1939 Hall. So my own story is woven together with in-depth interviews of 101 of my fellow volunteers, with the arc of my father losing his best buddy in World War II, a casualty of war, to my losing my best buddy due to Libya, a casualty of peace. So the challenge for those of you who are interested in organizing things or writing senior theses is what to even call this combination of elements. I finally figured out that this should be a collective memoir. And the question is how one should, organize this unique, unwieldy mass of raw information. It took a while, but after a lot of constant analysis, I came up with the following. Next. I derived some memoir principles in terms of what a collective memoir would be. One was to ensure that there's a narrative flow coherence within chapters and from chapter to chapter. I have to make sure that there's contextual relevance every time on every page. And then I did, in addition to a collective story, I also did collective chapters, which were not chronological. And the titles of these were things like Critters, Maladies, Victuals, Ruminations, and Women's Issues. The other trick was to build structure within structure. For example, if you've got all this massive information, you can characterize that information from small to large, from least important to most important, and then building substructures beneath that. And what I also did was I created space breaks between my story and others. Next. So one example, which is a lot of fun, is in Critters. I said, all right, I'm going to talk about critters in Libya, and I'm going to talk about them from the smallest to the largest within the chapter. So there's all that coherence that comes along. So I started going from left to right here, even though it should be, I guess, whatever, vertical. But I started with sandflies, and then flies, dung beetles, moved up to scorpions, canaries, ants, spiders, cockroaches, frogs, chameleons, giant fleas, black beetles, worms, mice, bitterns. Next page. And you can see here too, as just larger and larger animals, to where you work your way all up within the chapter to camels. So that way there's this whole coherence to the story. And that's just the example from the Critters chapter, that the same kind of sense of organization has to be imposed as well in a nonfiction creative scenario. Next. Also, to avoid dry or scholarly, no footnotes recitation, the book includes a whimsical, conversational, entertaining narrative that includes serious information. Relevant historical details that relate to the narrative are deftly folded in. For example, Alexander the Great, Churchill, Odysseus, and Mussolini. The book is unusual in that it includes 220 carefully curated photographs. And the book, for whatever reason, I call myself the Prince of Coincidence. So many coincidences in the book. And here's just one. On the very same day that trainee Marty Mueller announced that his father, Rudy, that of all the 65 Peace Corps countries around the world he would be assigned to Libya, his father an Air Force B-52 pilot, announced on that very day of all the countries he could be assigned to, he was assigned to Wheelus Air Force Base in Libya. Next. So what I'd like to do now is read you 3 quick readings from the book. The first one, and be careful with the next on this, is a chapter called The Guns of August. So on August 9th, and this takes place in training in Clearfield, Utah, where we had 30 Libyans and 120 Americans. On August 9th, we learned we would be practice teaching English for a number of weeks at Navajo elementary schools in Arizona. We would be grouped 3 Americans to 1 Libyan living in a hogan near each school. A few weeks later, some of us were chewing the fat with some Libyans in the barracks. I noticed a glint in Muhammad's locker. "Muhammad, what's that in your locker?" He looked startled, closed the partially open door and said, "Oh, nothing." "Come on, Muhammad, there's something in there." No, it's nothing." "Muhammad, you're going to have to open that door." He sheepishly backed off, and as he opened the locker, he said, "It's a gun." "Why did you buy a gun?" "It wasn't just me. We all bought guns." "You did?" "We heard we were all going down to the Navajo Indians' place." I thought, oh my God, Western movies. They're terrified of war-painted, war-chant whooping, hatchet-wielding, scalp-brandishing savages. 31 Libyans with guns let loose upon 31 Navajo villages. The New York Times headline flashed into my head. Next. Of course, I forthwith reported this to the administration. Despite their efforts to convince the Libyans to surrender their guns, the Libyans stubbornly stuck to their guns, as it were. Al White and company, that's the management guy, were flummoxed. In desperation, they called Peace Corps Washington. The very next day, a worldly wise old Washington hand arrived. You must know a lot of those guys down in DC. He summoned all the Libyans to a come to Allah meeting. Knowing that Arabs respect power above all else, he came right to the point. Either you all immediately turn in those guns, or tomorrow we're putting you all on a plane straight back to Libya. They turned in their guns. Next. Okay, this is from a chapter called Berbers, Bombs, and Bob Hope. In the middle of an English lesson, we were teaching English as a foreign language in Libya. In the middle of an English lesson, I cast my eyes over my class of 36 restless Libyan 5th grade boys. All wore white shawls swathed over their bodies in a variety of configurations. All wore tight-fitting red felt caps. Their faces varied from black to white. Most were swarthy like Arabs, but with a mixture of Berber that had accumulated over the centuries. In fact, I had a couple of Berbers that were I'm deviating from the text here, who were white and had blonde hair and blue eyes. Most were swarthy like Arabs, but with a mixture, it said that, okay. The classroom was adobe. It had no electricity. Open windows with no screens. Instead of a blackboard, a wall painted black. The grayish-brown desks were rough-hewn, 2 to a student, without drawers. The door was well worn and splintered. It was time to introduce a new English word, the noun knife. To illustrate, I decided to draw the pocket knife out of my pocket. Me, knife. Class, knife. Me, this is a knife. Class, this is a knife. On to the prepositions. I placed the knife on the table. Where's the knife? The knife is on the table. At this point, I suddenly had a should I or shouldn't I moment. Knife reminded me of a Bowie knife, a very large knife like that in Crocodile Dundee, which in turn reminded me of the Adventures of Jim Bowie show in 1950s television. In the opening credits of the show, the hero cocks his arm and flings a Bowie knife through the air. It's rendered in slow motion with dramatic helicopter rotor sound. The knife then slams point perfectly into a tree trunk with a zonk effect, followed by a sproing effect as the knife vibrates in place. I put the knife in my hand. Where's the knife? The knife is in the hand. Do I dare open up the knife and replicate the opening credits of the Adventures of Jim Bowie? There's that ratty old 15 feet to my left. It wouldn't hurt the door. I put the knife on my head. Where's the knife? The knife is on the head. I was not a knife expert. I was not Jim Bowie. I never even played mumblety-peg as a kid. At best, I did a little whittling or used a knife to cut string. If it worked, how great would it be? But if it failed, what a humiliation. I put the knife under the table. Where's the knife? The knife is under the table. What the hell? I opened the knife. In one motion, I cocked my arm and swiveled to the left. Taking dead aim, I released the knife, tumbling through the air. Ka-ching! It penetrated the door. It zonked. It sproinged. Not missing a beat, I said, "Where's the knife?" The students didn't answer. They were slack-jawed in amazement. A little louder, I said, "Where's the knife?" Still frozen. Even louder, I repeated, "Where is the knife?" Then in full-throated unison, they roared out a sentence they had never before uttered. "The knife is in the door." Behind my little anecdote above were three giants upon whose shoulders we stood. One, John F. Kennedy, bequeathed upon us the inspiration of the Peace Corps. Two, Noam Chomsky, the father of modern linguistics, bequeathed upon us the principle that all languages can be taught the same way. Three, John Rassias, an immersive foreign language pioneer who trained thousands around the world, bequeathed upon us the indefatigable, I can't pronounce that, indefatigable energy, verve, and drama to make classrooms come alive. Okay, next, last anecdote. This is from a chapter called Noticings, Pre-Love Letters, and Moto Guzzi's. And I don't know how many of you guys are linguists like the gentleman from the Princeton ambassador that knows 15 languages, but that alphabet below is the Berber alphabet and very intriguing looking to me. So one day between classes, as usual, the teachers and I sat down outside on the dirt to talk while the janitor, more euphemistically labeled a school custodian, Aribi El Urban, made tea. Aribi was a rotund, jolly fellow with cheeks pockmarked by smallpox. I told everything that my hobby was to learn how to count to 10 in various languages and that I would like to learn the same in Berber. So I whipped out a little notebook and pen and queried them in Arabic. How do you say one in Berber? The teacher said, Eden. I duly wrote this down. How do you say two in Berber? Another teacher said, Sin. I wrote this down. How do you say three? No sound. I looked up, my pen poised. How do you say three? Well, we don't have a word for three. Okay then, what's the word for four? Well, we don't have a word for four. Five then? No. Six? Shaking heads. 34? More shaking. 156? No. 1,467? No. I said, well, then how do you say any number that's more than two? And they said, oh, we just say a lot. With effort, I stifled a bursting laugh as I imagined a Berber math teacher drilling his students on their multiplication tables. Teacher, Abdurrahman, how much is 9 times 9? Abdurrahman, stroking his chin as he pondered carefully on this. A lot? Teacher, yes. Now, there's a follow-up to this. It's like a topper that Johnny Carson's so famous for. He said, when I recounted this to John McClane, another one of my 101 interviewees, many years later, 50 years later, he asked, well, what is the ultimate thing a Berber math teacher would ask? I said, I don't know. He said, he would ask the kids, how much is a lot times a lot? The kids would be stumped and the teacher would say, a lot more. Next. Just to show very quickly the powerfulness of carefully picking photographs, especially when you get these on the Kindle in color in the book. But a wonderful painting by Norman Rockwell of John F. Kennedy and Ethiopian Peace Corps volunteers. A shot of the fighting in Libya in the 1980s between the United States and Libya. Next. That's John Racias, the very dynamic Dartmouth professor. And then we've got a shot from the book of Mussolini in Libya in 1937. Next. On the left, some of you may know about Tuaregs. They're the ferocious Libyan warriors where the men wear the veils and the women do not. And on the right is a shot of some of the teachers at one of our Peace Corps volunteers' homes in the Fezzan, or deep in the Sahara Desert, and a sort of a fun shot. Next. On the left is a good friend of mine, Miled, and that's where he lived, this 10 foot by 10 foot, dirt floor place where he was living. And he didn't make any difference to him. That's where he was and where I hung out with him a lot. And then on the right is me, where a friend of mine and myself were hitchhiking all over Libya. And, we had to hitchhike in the back and be there with a camel. This camel, of course, weighs 1,000 pounds. And when we ran around curves that started to move towards us, we had to push our feet out to stop ourselves from getting crushed. Next. And there's me when I was a senior year. I was a drummer in the band with the Tiger. And that leads us up to any Q&A, Juan, that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Randy. I think that told us quite a bit about the Peace Corps as they relate to Princeton. And at this point, I see we have a few people, and I wanted to just open the floor and, in case anyone wants to ask something to Randy. Maybe you could introduce yourself. Go ahead, Andrew.
Hello, I'm Andy Snow. I'm class 75 and Peace Corps volunteer in Cameroon, 75 to 78, which I would just wanted to mention. Thank you for your presentation, Randy. It's interesting. Of course, Cameroon was completely different from Libya, and it was a different time too. I don't think I saw the Cameroonian flag on your list of flags. So at some point I can follow up with you and you can add me to your database.
Yeah, please do.
Add Cameroon to your database too. I would also I'm also a retired State Department Foreign Service officer. And there's lots of former Peace Corps volunteers in the State Department and AID and so on. And I think that really enriches those agencies quite a bit. I would quibble a little bit. I mean, I'm sure in the book it's different, but in your slides, it seemed almost as though you were equating Peace Corps with peace, which is obviously a little simplistic. I would argue that the State Department and U.S. diplomats are, in a sense, the peace department of the U.S. government, and we're trying to, as much as we can, through diplomacy, prevent conflicts unless they're absolutely necessary. Anyway, just a couple of random thoughts, but thank you very much for your presentation.
Well, Andrew, that's a great point. And I didn't have time to bother, but you have to draw the line someplace. And where I drew the line is to define, it's people who are actually out in the field. So it's not including military, it's not including diplomats, it's people who are living, without running water, without electricity, living out in the boonies. So that's the only distinction.
Thanks.
I have a little song for you, Andrew. Au Cameroun, berceau de nos ancêtres, va debout
et jaloux de ta liberté. À tes enfants, ton drapeau fier doit être un symbole à tant de voix et d'unité. How do you know that? I can't believe it.
I collect national anthems and I know them all.
I see. Well, that one, the only reason I know that one is because they would, of course, have the student. I was also an English teacher, and they would have the students, sing the national anthem every morning, before class and stuff. So
that's great
to know it after a while.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Randy, this is Bob Farron. I don't know if you can see me, but
I see you.
yeah. Hi, how are you? Randy, how many of our classmates, class of 68 here, how many of our classmates trained with you in that first period of joining the Peace Corps?
Well, Cameron Hume was the only one in the class of 68 who was in Libya with us. There was a guy, Jack Seifert, from the class of 67 who was in Libya.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, I've collected the names of 12 others in our class who were in the Peace Corps, but they were in other countries.
Yeah. Did they train with you, or was it country by country?
Country by country, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we're looking forward to having a chat with you all and we'll try to collect as many of our fellow classmates who are Peace Corps volunteers to be on that call as well. So thank you again for your presentation. That was very nice.
Great. Thank you.
I'm going to drop off now. I've got something coming up, but thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Yep. Be well.
Okay.
Hey there, I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Teddy Bhatia. First of all, thank you very much, Randy, for sharing your story of the Peace Corps. I am an accepted student at Princeton, but taking a gap year this year and hoping to possibly join the Peace Corps after my time at Princeton. And I was wondering, my question is, when you were in Libya, what portion of the work you were doing there felt like directly helping the community versus helping on behalf of the U.S. government?
Good question. First of all, basically what goes on, and there's two categories of things in Peace Corps. One is community development per se, where people will be doing literally community development and helping people with farming and all that kind of thing. And then there's technical training, such as we were doing, which was teaching English. Now, to the degree that helped people, we were teaching them English so that they could learn to go overseas and go to the United States or to England and learn English and then come back to their own country. And certainly we've seen a lot of effect on that. The second thing is, I think the government tried very carefully to stay in the background when it came to the Peace Corps. They let you out on your own, and you try not to get involved in any sort of political discussions or what is the U.S. here for or what are you here for, and pretty much the way we experienced it in Libya, and I think around the world, because I've read 43 different Peace Corps memoirs about this as well, is you are kind of like your own little world there, and it's your world, and you interface with the community, and you get enormous bonding going on between yourself and the peoples in each of those countries, and that's the real magic of it. And if you want to put some numbers around it, it's hard to put numbers, but you can do some extrapolations, because I probably interfaced with 200 people when I was there, and I was one of 200 volunteers, and you multiply that for 1 year for one country, and then you multiply that times 87 countries over 67 years, there's a big ripple effect that happens as a result of that.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think we have still 5 minutes, and so I thought I will jump in and ask a question that could be for Randy or for Andy or maybe for both. Which is, to what extent do either of you think that the Peace Corps and the State Department are well integrated? And if you think it could be done better based on your experience in Libya, Randy, or in your case, Andy, based on your professional experience, how could the two organizations be better integrated potentially to serve their purpose of peaceful diplomacy as opposed to militaristic aims?
Sure. I can pick up on that, Andy. I've read a lot of books also, not only about the Peace Corps, but about the Peace Corps itself and its organization and so forth and the whole history of it. And Sergeant Shriver and all his successors have been very careful not to integrate the Peace Corps with the State Department. They made it a separate agency. They tried to stay separate from the State Department and do their own thing. So they just wanted it to be a separate kind of activity that wasn't influenced by, the State Department.
If I could just jump in, yeah, exactly right. So, and that's, I think, continued to the present day, as far as I'm aware. They're really keen on, I mean, the U.S. government has always been keen on keeping, and the whole idea of the Peace Corps is to be very separate and not be like a direct instrument of U.S. foreign policy. And in the field, there's very minimal contact. I mean, when I was working at an embassy overseas in countries where there were Peace Corps volunteers, the country director would, she's a U.S. government official, he or she, and they would come to the country team meeting at the embassy. But otherwise, they were pretty autonomous, and it was very separate. And I think it's good that way, because you want the Peace Corps volunteers not to be perceived as sort of, little diplomats or agents of the U.S. government. I mean, one thing you do run into, though, in so many countries is people suspect Peace Corps volunteers of being spies and things like that, which is, I even ran into that in my experience, Cameron, which is somewhat ludicrous if you saw us Peace Corps volunteers out there. But people have this kind of mindset. So it's very, as Randy said, it's very separate, and it should be separate, I think.
Yeah.
I came up with a sort of insight, Andy and Juan, about this thing. This goes on all over the world, where the premise is that the Peace Corps are there for spies. And I was in this village 85 miles south of the Mediterranean. There's 500 people. There were no institutes of learning there. There's no air bases. There was no secret plans. There's nothing there. And yet they had someone spying on me. But it's the psychology that if we're spying on Randy, that means there must be something worth spying on in our village.
I ran into something very similar where there had been, I came back to my town at the end of the summer. We would work on training programs in the summer, and then I came back, and somehow I saw the préfet, who's like the small representative of the central government, who's very powerful, because it was really basically a dictatorship. And I asked how things were going, or small talk kind of thing. And there had been labor unrest at like the only factory in this county sort of place, and they were, I heard later that people thought that that's why I was there. It was like to spy on what was going on in this obscure part of Cameroon. Like, I was like, oh God. Anyway, and then later I worked at the State Department. It's like, it's hard to imagine us caring about what's going on in some back of beyond in a country like that. But anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's almost 8 p.m. So at this point, I don't know if anyone has any final questions that or thoughts they want to share. Well, in that case, I wanted to thank Randy on behalf of the Princeton Club of Washington, and thank those of you who are still here and those who left 5 minutes ago. And so thank you, Randy, for coming, quote unquote,
Thank you
to the club here, and I wish everyone happy holidays.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.